Most people, you see, don't fail because they aim too high and miss. They fail because they aim too low and hit. Or worse, they don't aim at all. They just exist, drifting from one day to the next, 1 year to the next, until suddenly they look back and wonder where their life went. Success is not something you pursue. Success is something you attract by the person you become. And becoming that person requires constant growth, constant leveling up. The marketplace pays for value, and you've got to be more valuable tomorrow than you are today. I remember talking to a young man once who wanted financial success. I asked him, what are you becoming to make yourself more valuable to the marketplace? He looked at me blankly. He'd been working the same job for 7 years, doing the same things, developing the same skills, or rather not developing at all. And he wondered why his income hadn't changed. You must understand this fundamental truth. Your income may grow by chance, but it will grow by choice when you grow. When you force yourself to learn new skills, to develop new abilities, to become more than you were yesterday, that's when everything changes. Now, let me tell you something that might surprise you. Forcing yourself to level up isn't about pushing harder in the areas you're already working in. That's just more of the same. No, leveling up means doing what you've never done before. It means stretching beyond your comfort zone into territories that frighten you a little or maybe a lot. I had a friend who was terrified of public speaking, absolutely terrified. But he recognized that this fear was holding him back in his career. So what did he do? He joined Toastmasters. The first time he stood up to speak, his hands trembled so badly he could barely hold his notes. His voice quavered. He forgot half of what he wanted to say, but he did it anyway. And then he did it again and again, each time forcing himself to level up just a little bit more. Today he speaks to thousands with confidence and ease. He didn't improve because time passed. He improved because he forced himself to grow. You see, growth is not automatic. The passing of time doesn't guarantee development. I know people who haven't had 20 years of experience. They've had 1 year of experience repeated 20 times. And they wonder why they're stuck. To level up, you must be willing to be a beginner again and again. You must embrace the discomfort of not knowing, of not being skilled, of making mistakes. Mastery in one area gives you confidence, but stepping into a new area requires courage. And that's where most people stop. They prefer the comfort of what they know to the growth that comes from what they don't. Let me share something with you about how life works. Life doesn't respond to what you want. It doesn't respond to your wishes or your hopes or your dreams. Life responds to what you commit to. Life responds to what you're willing to pay the price for. If you want a better life, you must commit to becoming a better person. I often ask audiences, how many of you would like to double your income in the next 3 to 5 years? Nearly every hand goes up. Then I ask, how many of you have a specific plan to double your value to the marketplace in that same time period? Suddenly there aren't many hands in the air. That's the disconnect. That's why people stay stuck. Forcing yourself to level up isn't some mysterious process. It's actually quite simple, though not easy. It starts with a decision, not a wish, not a hope, a decision, a commitment that from this day forward, you will not settle for less than you're capable of becoming. Once you've made that decision, the next step is education. Continuous, never-ending education. Leaders are readers. I've told my audiences for years, the books you don't read won't help you. The seminars you don't attend can't change your life. The skills you don't develop won't increase your value. I remember talking to a successful CEO who reads a book a week. I asked him, why do you read so much? His answer was profound. He said, because my life changed when I realized that who I am in 5 years depends largely on 2 things, the people I meet and the books I read. He forced himself to level up through constant learning, and the marketplace rewarded him handsomely for it. Now, here's something crucial to understand. When you force yourself to level up, there will be resistance. Internal resistance, your own doubts, fears, and limiting beliefs. And external resistance, the skepticism of others, the pull of old habits, the comfort of familiar surroundings. This resistance is normal. In fact, it's a sign that you're on the right track. Think about working out at the gym. When does growth happen? When you're comfortable. No, growth happens when your muscles are stretched beyond what's comfortable, when they're challenged beyond their current capacity. That's when they respond by getting stronger. The same is true for every area of your life. I've learned that most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 5 years. This is because they don't understand the power of consistent, compounded growth. When you force yourself to level up day after day, month after month, year after year, the results aren't just additive, they're multiplicative. Imagine improving just 1% each day. That doesn't sound like much, does it? But do you know what happens when you improve 1% daily for a year? You end up 37 times better, not just 365% better. That's the miracle of compound growth. Small disciplines repeated with consistency every day lead to great achievements gained slowly over time. Let me tell you about discipline, because this is where many people stumble. They think forcing yourself to level up means making dramatic changes all at once. It doesn't. It means establishing disciplines that you practice consistently, even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. There are two pains in life, the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. The difference is discipline weighs ounces while regret weighs tons. I'd rather live with the pain of discipline, the temporary discomfort of pushing myself beyond what's easy, than the crushing weight of looking back on a life of unrealized potential. The disciplines that lead to growth aren't complicated. Reading good books, attending classes or seminars, seeking out mentors, setting goals and tracking progress, managing time effectively, taking care of your health, developing meaningful relationships. These are simple disciplines, but they're not easy. They require forcing yourself to do what others aren't willing to do, so you can have what others will never have. You know, people often ask me, Jim, how can I find motivation? And I tell them motivation is not something you find. It's something you create through action. You don't wait until you feel motivated to start. You start, and then motivation follows. Force yourself to begin, and your emotions will catch up with your actions. I remember when I started my speaking career, I wasn't naturally gifted. I wasn't charismatic. I wasn't polished, but I forced myself to keep showing up, to keep learning, to keep refining my message and my delivery. I didn't wait until I felt confident to begin. I began, and confidence came through action. That's how it always works. Another crucial aspect of forcing yourself to level up is the willingness to fail. Not just to accept failure when it happens, but to actively seek situations where failure is possible, even likely. Because that's where growth happens. That's where breakthroughs occur. Most people are so afraid of failure that they never attempt anything great. They live in the shallow end of life, where it's safe, where the water never rises above their knees. But all the treasures of life, the deep satisfaction, the remarkable achievements, the lasting contributions, those are found in the deep end. And to get there, you must be willing to go where you can't touch bottom. I failed more times than I can count. The first 5 started businesses that didn't succeed. I've given speeches that fell flat. I've invested in ventures that lost money. But each failure taught me something valuable. Each setback contained the seeds of equivalent or greater benefit if I had the wisdom to search for them. When you force yourself to level up, you must develop this wisdom, the ability to extract lessons from every experience, especially the painful ones. Success without a deep understanding of how you achieved it is fleeting. But lessons learned through struggle and failure become part of you. They transform not just what you do, but who you are. Speaking of transformation, let's talk about changing your identity. This is perhaps the most powerful way to force yourself to level up. Most people try to change their results without changing their self-image, and it never works long term. If you see yourself as a $50,000 earner, you'll find a way to earn $50,000, even if you temporarily make more. If you see yourself as someone who's always a few pounds overweight, you'll return to that state, even if you temporarily lose weight. To permanently level up, you must change how you see yourself. You must begin to identify with the person you're becoming, not just the person you've been. This isn't pretending or fake it till you make it. It's recognizing that you are always in transition, always becoming, and consciously choosing what you're becoming. I knew a woman who wanted to become a successful entrepreneur. She had the skills, she had the ideas, but she still saw herself as an employee. She talked like an employee, she thought like an employee, she made decisions like an employee. And so despite her efforts, her business struggled. It wasn't until she began to think and speak and act like a business owner, to identify with that role, that things changed for her. When you change your identity, your behaviors follow naturally. If you identify as a healthy person, you don't have to force yourself to exercise and eat well. That's just what healthy people do. If you identify as a top performer in your field, you don't have to force yourself to develop your skills. That's just what top performers do. Your actions align with your identity. Another crucial element of forcing yourself to level up is your environment, who you spend time with. What media you consume, the physical spaces you occupy, these shape you in ways both subtle and profound. As I often say, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Their habits, their mindsets, their expectations, all of it rubs off on you. If you want to level up, you must be willing to evaluate your environment honestly. Are the people around you pulling you up or pushing you down? Does your environment make growth easier or harder? Sometimes the hardest part of leveling up is being willing to outgrow situations and relationships that once served you but now limit you. I'm not suggesting you abandon old friends or family, but I am suggesting you be intentional about seeking out relationships with people who are where you want to be, who challenge you to grow, who raise your standards rather than reinforce your limitations. I remember talking to a young entrepreneur who complained that he couldn't get his business off the ground. When I asked about his routine, he told me he spent most evenings playing video games with friends who had no entrepreneurial ambitions. Now, there's nothing wrong with video games or with friends who choose different paths. But if you're trying to build a business and everyone around you is focused on other priorities, you're swimming upstream. Change your environment, and suddenly you're swimming with the current. Let's talk about standards, because this is where forcing yourself to level up becomes concrete. Your standards determine your outcomes. If you're willing to accept mediocrity, you'll get mediocrity. If you demand excellence from yourself, excellence becomes the minimum. I often tell the story of two salespeople who worked at the same company, selling the same product with the same training in the same territory. One consistently outsold the other by a factor of 3. What was the difference? The top performer had decided that anything less than 5 sales a day was unacceptable. The average performer was satisfied with 2. Same circumstances, different standards, dramatically different results. When you raise your standards, you change what's possible. Things that once seemed challenging become your new normal. You create a new floor for your performance, not just a new ceiling. And that's how sustainable growth happens, by continually raising the floor. Now, forcing yourself to level up requires energy, physical, mental, emotional energy. And you can't give what you don't have. That's why personal management, taking care of yourself, is fundamental to sustainable growth. I see too many people who are trying to level up in their careers while neglecting their health, their relationships, their spiritual well-being. They think they're making a wise trade-off, but they're actually undermining the very foundation they need for long-term success. You can't perform at your best when you're exhausted, stressed, and disconnected from what gives your life meaning. True success is not about achievement in one area at the expense of everything else. It's about creating a life of balance and wholeness. That doesn't mean equal time for everything. There will be seasons when certain aspects of life require more focus. But it does mean being intentional about all the dimensions that make up a fulfilling life. Force yourself to level up in how you manage your energy. Force yourself to level up in how you manage your time. Force yourself to level up in how you manage your focus. These fundamental capacities determine what's possible in every other area. Let me share something powerful with you. Most people have no idea how much they're capable of. They've been conditioned to think small, to set modest goals, to be realistic. But what if what's realistic is determined not by some external standard, but by what you're willing to commit to? What if your potential is far greater than you've been led to believe? I believe that inside every person is untapped capacity for creativity, for productivity, for impact. Most never discover this capacity because they never push hard enough against their limits to find out what's really there. They mistake the discomfort of growth for a signal to stop, when it's actually a signal that they're on the verge of breakthrough. Forcing yourself to level up means refusing to accept artificial limitations. It means questioning assumptions about what's possible. It means being willing to test boundaries rather than accepting them as fixed. I remember working with a company whose sales had plateaued for 3 years. When I asked the leadership team why they couldn't grow beyond that level, they gave me a list of realities: market saturation, competitive pressures, economic conditions. These weren't imaginary factors, but they had accepted them as absolute limitations rather than challenges to overcome. When they forced themselves to question these assumptions, to look for ways through rather than accepting barriers, they discovered opportunities they'd been blind to before. Within 18 months, they doubled their sales. The same principle applies to your personal growth. What realities have you accepted that might actually be limiting beliefs in disguise? What if you force yourself to question them, to test them, to look beyond them? Another dimension of forcing yourself to level up is developing clarity about what you really want. Not what others expect of you, not what society defines as success, but what truly matters to you. Because without this clarity, you'll find yourself climbing a ladder only to discover it's leaning against the wrong wall. I've met too many people who achieved conventional success only to realize it didn't bring the fulfillment they expected. They forced themselves to level up toward goals that weren't truly their own, and the achievement felt hollow as a result. The most powerful motivation comes from aligning your growth with your deepest values and authentic aspirations. When you're clear about what truly matters to you, Forcing yourself to level up isn't just about discipline. It becomes an expression of your integrity, your commitment to becoming who you're meant to be. This doesn't mean the path will be easy. In fact, the more meaningful your goals, the more significant the challenges you'll face. But when your path is aligned with your purpose, you'll find resources of courage and perseverance you didn't know you had. Let me talk about something that often gets overlooked in discussions of success and growth: the power of celebration, of acknowledging progress, not just destination, of recognizing how far you've come, not just how far you have yet to go. Many driven people are so focused on the next challenge that they never fully experience the satisfaction of their achievements. They force themselves to level up, but miss the joy that should come with growth. This isn't just a quality of life issue, though that matters too. It's also pragmatic, because sustainable motivation requires reinforcement. Learn to celebrate milestones. Learn to acknowledge your progress. Learn to appreciate the person you're becoming, not just strive for the person you want to be. These moments of recognition and gratitude aren't distractions from the path of growth. They're fuel for the journey. Now, as we talk about forcing yourself to level up, I want to address something important. Growth isn't linear. It never has been, it never will be. There will be periods of dramatic progress followed by plateaus that seem to go on forever. There will be breakthroughs and setbacks, leaps forward and steps back. During the plateaus, those times when you're working hard but don't seem to be making progress, that's when most people quit. They interpret the lack of visible progress as failure, but often these plateaus are just the preparation for the next jump in performance. Think about water being heated. The temperature rises steadily to 99 degrees Celsius, but the water remains liquid. Nothing seems to change despite the continued application of heat. Then, with just one more degree, everything transforms as the water turns to steam. Those long plateaus in your growth are often like that, essential preparation for a transformation that will happen suddenly when all the conditions are right. The key is to keep going, to trust the process, to force yourself to maintain the disciplines of growth, even when you don't see immediate results. Those who succeed in the long run aren't necessarily the most talented or the most fortunate. They're the ones who persevere through the plateaus. Let's talk about something practical, the role of systems in forcing yourself to level up. Willpower is limited, motivation fluctuates, but systems, reliable processes that move you toward your goals regardless of how you feel on a given day. Systems are the bridge between intention and result. I've found that successful people don't rely on heroic efforts or bursts of inspiration. They create systems that make the right actions inevitable. They structure their environment, their schedule, their habits in ways that naturally lead to growth. If you want to level up your fitness, don't depend on finding motivation to exercise each day. Create a system, perhaps by working out first thing in the morning, or by finding an accountability partner, or by putting your gym clothes out the night before. Make the right action the path of least resistance. If you want to level up your learning, don't wait until you feel inspired to pick up a book. Create a system, perhaps by reading for 30 minutes before bed, or by listening to educational content during your commute, or by joining a group that discusses important ideas. Make learning a natural part of your routine rather than something that requires special effort. These systems don't have to be complex. In fact, the simpler they are, the more likely they are to work. The goal isn't sophistication, it's effectiveness. What system, no matter how basic, will reliably move you toward your goals? That's the question to focus on. Another dimension of forcing yourself to level up is the willingness to ask for help. Many people, particularly those with a strong independent streak, try to grow entirely on their own. They see asking for guidance as a sign of weakness rather than wisdom. This is a costly mistake. No one achieves significant growth without the help of others, teachers, mentors, coaches, peers who provide feedback and accountability. The most successful people are often those most willing to seek guidance, to learn from the experience of others, to invite perspectives that challenge their thinking. I remember talking to a highly accomplished executive who told me about his practice of seeking out 5 mentors whenever he entered a new field or took on a new challenge. 5 different people who could offer different perspectives, different expertise, different insights. He credited this practice as one of the primary reasons he was able to succeed in so many different contexts. When you force yourself to level up, part of that forcing should be overcoming the reluctance to ask for help, to admit what you don't know, to make yourself vulnerable to guidance. This isn't weakness, it's one of the most powerful accelerators of growth available to you. Let's talk about something that might surprise you. Forcing yourself to level up sometimes means slowing down. In our rush to achieve, to acquire, to advance, we often sacrifice depth for speed. We learn enough to get by rather than mastering fundamentals. We move on to the next challenge before consolidating what we've learned from the current one. True mastery, the kind that creates extraordinary value and opens doors to exceptional opportunities, comes from depth, not just breadth, from understanding principles, not just techniques, from knowing not just what works, but why it works. This kind of deep learning often requires periods of apparent slowdown, times when you're not acquiring new skills, but deepening your understanding of what you already know. Don't mistake these periods for stagnation. They're essential to reaching levels of performance that remain inaccessible to those who are always in a hurry. I've noticed that many people who force themselves to level up focus exclusively on adding new skills, new knowledge, new capabilities. But sometimes leveling up requires subtraction, eliminating activities, commitments, and even relationships that drain your energy and diffuse your focus. Every yes to something that matters means saying no to many things that don't. Every investment of time and energy in growth requires divesting from something else. Be willing to evaluate honestly what needs to be eliminated from your life to create space for what's most important. This isn't about achieving some idealized minimalism. It's about intentionality, about ensuring that what fills your life aligns with your highest priorities and deepest values. Sometimes the most powerful way to force yourself to level up is to clear away the clutter, both external and internal, that's holding you back. As we near the end of our time together, I want to address something fundamental. Throughout this talk, I've used the phrase, force yourself to level up. And there's truth in that language. Growth does require a kind of force, a willingness to push beyond comfort, to overcome inertia, to persist through difficulty. But I don't want you to mistake this force for harshness, for self-criticism, for a punitive relationship with yourself. The most sustainable kind of growth doesn't come from beating yourself into submission. It comes from a place of self-respect and genuine care for your development. The most effective forcing is more like the firm guidance a loving parent gives a child, insistent on what matters, unwilling to accept less than what's possible, but always coming from a place of fundamental acceptance and belief in potential. As you push yourself to grow, to learn, to achieve, do so with compassion for your humanity, for your imperfections, for the reality that growth is rarely linear and never without setbacks. Hold yourself to high standards, yes, but don't withhold your own approval until you reach some distant goal. Learn to appreciate your progress even as you strive for more. Let me leave you with this. The decision to force yourself to level up, to commit to continuous growth and development, is ultimately a decision about who you want to become. Not just what you want to achieve or acquire, but who you want to be. The achievements and acquisitions matter, of course. The career advancement, the financial rewards, the recognition, these are real benefits that come from growth. But they're not the heart of it. The heart of it is becoming a person of greater capacity, greater wisdom, greater contribution. When you force yourself to level up day after day, year after year, you're not just changing your circumstances. You're changing yourself. You're becoming someone who sees more, understands more, can do more, can give more. And that transformation is the greatest reward of all. So I challenge you today, don't settle for less than you're capable of. Don't accept the limitations others place on you, or worse, the limitations you place on yourself. Force yourself to grow. Force yourself to learn. Force yourself to try what scares you, to persist when things get hard, to get up when you fall. Not because you're not enough as you are, but because there's so much more within you waiting to be expressed. So much more you can become. So much more you can contribute. The world needs people who are willing to force themselves to level up, who refuse to settle for mediocrity, who demonstrate what's possible when someone commits fully to their own development and growth. Be one of those people, starting today, starting now, not tomorrow, not when circumstances are perfect, not when it feels comfortable. Now, that's how transformation happens. That's how you force yourself to level up. And that's how you create a life of meaning, impact, and lasting fulfillment. Thank you.